There are moments in life when everything seems uncertain, when the future looks like a road covered in thick fog and fear grips your heart like a vice. You pray, but nothing seems to change. You fight, but the battle only gets harder. You knock, but every door remains shut. In these moments, the enemy whispers in your ear, "You're alone. There is no way out." But what if I told you that everything you're worried about, every battle, every storm, every impossibility has already been taken care of? What if the solution has already been written in heaven before you even knew the problem existed? You are standing in the middle of a divine script and God has already worked behind the scenes. Stay with me, because by the end of this message, your eyes will be open to something powerful. You see, faith is not just believing that God will do something. Faith is knowing that He already has. The Bible tells us that before the foundation of the world, God had a plan. He is not reacting to your situation. He is not figuring things out as they happen. God is not bound by time, nor is He surprised by what you face. He declares the end from the beginning. What looks like a disaster to you is already a testimony in His hands. This is why Scripture says, "Before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear." Isaiah 65:24. God already knows what you need before you ask. He has already provided the breakthrough before you even knew you needed one. You may be praying for deliverance, but God already sent the deliverance before you even knew there was a trap. You may be crying for provision, but God already placed the provision in your path before you even felt the need. He is the God who moves before you move, speaks before you speak, and acts before you even realize there is a need for action. The enemy wants to convince you that you are stuck, that there is no way out, that you are abandoned. But listen to me carefully. God is never late. His timing is always perfect. Even when you cannot see it, even when you do not feel it, He is already working. The delay you are experiencing is not a denial, it is preparation. The waiting season is not a wasted season. It is a divine setup. Think about Joseph. He had dreams of greatness, dreams of ruling, dreams of purpose. But then, everything in his life seemed to go in the opposite direction. Betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned. His reality looked nothing like the promise. But here's the secret. God was not trying to figure out how to rescue Joseph. The rescue was already planned before the trouble began. The prison was not his destiny, but it was a path to his destiny. The pit was not a mistake. It was a transportation system. God had already worked it out. Your situation may look like it's falling apart, but what if it's actually falling into place? What if the storm you are in right now is positioning you for something greater? What if the pain you are feeling is the birthplace of your purpose? Look at the Israelites standing before the Red Sea. Behind them, Pharaoh's army was coming in full force. In front of them, the sea seemed to block their escape. Fear gripped them and they cried out to Moses, saying, "Why did you bring us here to die?" But what they didn't know was that God had already worked it out. The sea was not an obstacle. It was the doorway. The enemy was not a threat. He was about to be destroyed. What they saw as an impossible situation, God saw as an opportunity to reveal His glory. When Moses stretched out his staff, the waters parted. Not because God was figuring things out in that moment, but because the solution had already been prepared before the problem even arose. That is how God works. What looks like a wall is actually a door. What looks like a delay is actually protection. What looks like rejection is actually redirection. But the problem is we want to see the whole picture before we trust God. We want to understand every step before we take the first one. But faith is about walking when you don't see the road. Trusting when you don't see the answer. Believing when everything around you says it's impossible. Think about Abraham. God told him, "Go to a land I will show you." No map, no GPS, no details. Just a command to move. And as he moved, God revealed the next step. Some of you are waiting for God to show you the whole plan before you trust Him. But God is saying, just move. Just trust. Just believe. The provision is already there. The door is already open. The breakthrough is already assigned to you. But you have to take that first step in faith. Jesus said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Matthew 6:34. Worry is the enemy of faith. When you worry, you are doubting what God has already prepared for you. Worrying is acting as if God is still trying to figure things out. But listen to me. He already has. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. The problem you are facing today was already resolved in eternity. Some of you are carrying burdens you were never meant to carry. You are losing sleep over things that God has already taken care of. You are crying over battles that have already been won. If you only knew what was waiting on the other side of your obedience, you would not be afraid. If you only knew how close you were to your breakthrough, you would not quit now. If you only knew how God has orchestrated every detail of your life, you would not stress over what's happening today. Remember when Jesus was asleep in the boat during the storm? The disciples were panicking, thinking they were about to die. But Jesus slept. Why? Because he knew something they didn't know. He knew the storm was not the end of their story. He knew that the waves could not sink them. He knew that the other side was already written into the plan. The storm you are in is not the end of your story. The setback you are facing is not the final chapter. The pain you are feeling is not permanent. You may not see the way out, but that does not mean there is no way out. You may not understand what God is doing, but that does not mean he is not doing something. If you could see what God sees, you would not be afraid. If you could hear what he has already spoken over you, you would not doubt. If you could glimpse the victory he has already secured for you, you would not hesitate to trust him. So let me ask you, what if the very thing you are stressing over right now has already been taken care of? What if the answer to your prayer has already been released? What if your miracle is already in motion? What if in heaven's timeline the battle is already won? Stay with me, because there is more I need to share with you. The greatest challenge to faith is not the presence of the storm, but the inability to see beyond it. The enemy wants you to be so consumed by what is in front of you that you forget who is behind you. He wants you to measure your future by your present struggles. But let me remind you of something powerful. God has never been limited by what you see. He is not restricted by what you understand. His ways are higher than your ways, and his thoughts are far beyond what your mind can comprehend. That means while you are looking at the problem, he has already prepared the solution. While you are waiting for an answer, he has already spoken it into existence. The delay you perceive is not a delay at all. It is a divine process in motion. Look at Daniel when he prayed and fasted for 21 days, seeking an answer from God. From the first moment he prayed, heaven heard him. The angel later told him, from the first day you set your heart to understand, your words were heard. But the manifestation of the answer was delayed due to a battle in the heavenly realm. That means some of you are waiting for something that has already been dispatched. The breakthrough has already been ordered. The deliverance has already been assigned. The provision has already been released. What you need is not to panic, but to stand firm in faith, knowing that what God has spoken cannot be reversed. When God sent manna from heaven to the Israelites, he did not send it ahead of time. He did not store it up in barns for them. Instead, he sent it daily. Why? Because he was teaching them to trust him daily. He was showing them that provision is not something you chase. It is something that follows when you walk in obedience. Some of you are stressing over the future, but God is saying, I will provide for you day by day. You are anxious about tomorrow, but tomorrow is already in God's hands. If he fed Elijah by commanding ravens, if he sustained a widow in famine with a handful of flour, if he multiplied 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed thousands, do you think he will fail you? The enemy wants to magnify your problem so much that you forget the promise. He wants you to think that what you are going through is bigger than what God has already spoken. But let me tell you something. God's word is greater than your circumstance. His promise is stronger than your struggle. His plan is more powerful than your opposition. If he said it, it must come to pass. Look at the life of Job. He lost everything, his wealth, his health, his children, everything seemed to collapse at once. His friends doubted him. His wife told him to curse God and die. But what they did not understand was that Job's suffering was not his end. It was only a process. What Job could not see was that even in his lowest moment, God had already secured his restoration. In the midst of his pain, Job did not know that God had already determined to give him back double of everything he lost. What if I told you that what you lost is nothing compared to what God has already set aside for you? What if the suffering you are enduring is only a setup for an even greater testimony? Faith is not about seeing, it is about believing. It is about walking forward even when the road is invisible. It is about trusting that God has already laid the foundation, even when you cannot see the structure. That is why Paul said, we walk by faith, not by sight. If you live by what you see, you will always be shaken. But if you live by faith, you will be unmovable, because you will know that no matter what is happening, God is in control. There was a moment when Jesus stood before a grieving Mary and Martha. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. The tomb was sealed. The people had already accepted that it was over. But Jesus spoke words that shattered their human understanding. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? What they thought was too late was actually right on time. What they thought was over was just beginning. What they thought was a permanent loss was about to become an unforgettable miracle. Some of you have already given up on certain prayers. You think it is too late. The door is closed. The opportunity is gone. But listen, God does not operate in human timelines. He does not follow earthly limitations. What seems dead to you is still alive in His hands. The tomb may be closed, but He holds the keys to resurrection. Some of you are worried about how things will work out. You are trying to figure out how God will make a way. But let me remind you, He does not need your blueprint. He does not require your permission. He does not ask for your approval before moving. He is sovereign. He is all-powerful. He is beyond comprehension. If He could part the Red Sea with a breath, if He could bring down the walls of Jericho with a shout, if He could raise Jesus from the grave, do you really think your situation is beyond His reach? Too often we limit God to our human understanding. We try to fit Him into our expectations. But God does not move according to human logic. He moves according to divine purpose. That is why He can make rivers in the desert, create paths in the wilderness, and turn what was meant for evil into something good. That is why He can use a shepherd boy to defeat a giant, a prisoner to rule a kingdom, and a barren woman to give birth to a prophet. His methods are unpredictable, but His faithfulness is undeniable. When the disciples were caught in a storm, they panicked, thinking they were going to die. But in the midst of the chaos, Jesus came walking on the very thing they feared, the waves. What does that tell you? It tells you that what looks like it will destroy you is actually under His feet. What looks like it will take you down is already beneath His authority. The storm is not in control. He is. The winds are not in charge. He is. The enemy is not winning. God is. That is why even when you do not understand what is happening, you must stand firm. Even when it looks like everything is against you, you must trust. Even when you feel like giving up, you must hold on. Because what you do not see is greater than what you do. What God has planned is greater than what you fear. Do not let temporary troubles make you doubt eternal promises. Do not let a bad season convince you that your life is over. Do not let unanswered prayers make you think that God is silent. His silence is not absence. His delay is not denial. His ways are perfect, and His plans never fail. So whatever you are facing today, know this: God is not figuring things out. He is not scrambling to fix what is broken. He is not searching for solutions. The answer is already set. The provision is already arranged. The breakthrough is already scheduled. The only thing left for you to do is believe. Because whether you see it or not, whether you feel it or not, whether you understand it or not, God has already worked it out. And if you hold on, if you do not quit, if you stand firm in faith, you will see it come to pass. Stay with me, because there is still more I need to tell you. When you look back at your life, you will realize that every time you thought it was over, God was still working. Every time you thought the door was shut permanently, He was preparing a better one to open. Every moment you believed you were forgotten, He was writing your next chapter. God has never abandoned you. He has never left your story incomplete. Even when you couldn't see His hand, He was guiding you. Even when you didn't feel His presence, He was right there beside you. The problem with human nature is that we want to understand everything before we believe. We want to see the full picture before we trust. But faith does not work that way. Faith says, even when I don't see it, I know He is working. Even when I don't feel it, I know He is present. Even when I don't understand, I know He has a plan. This is the kind of faith that moves mountains. This is the kind of faith that pleases God. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it is impossible to please God. Why? Because faith is the evidence of things not seen. Faith is trusting in what is already finished, even when it is not yet visible. Many of you are struggling right now because you are looking at your situation with human eyes. You are measuring God's ability by what you see. But you have to understand that the unseen realm is more real than the visible one. Before you were born, God had already planned your destiny. Before you encountered your struggle, He had already prepared your breakthrough. He is not reacting to your problems. He is leading you through a divine process. Look at the story of Joseph. His brothers betrayed him. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. For years, it seemed like his life was only moving backward. But what he didn't know was that every setback was a setup. What he didn't see was that God had already arranged for him to be second in command over all of Egypt. When the time was right, he was promoted and everything made sense. What does that tell you? It tells you that your present pain does not define your future purpose. It tells you that even when life seems unfair, God is still in control. It tells you that what the enemy meant for evil, God will always turn it for good. You may be in the middle of a test, but God has already determined your victory. You may be facing obstacles, but God has already made a way through. You may be wondering how things will come together, but God has already worked it out. That means your only responsibility is to trust Him. To keep walking even when you don't see the road. To keep believing even when nothing makes sense. To keep praising even before the breakthrough comes. Because when you trust in Him completely, you will see what He has prepared for you all along.